Welcome to Project 2. I'm going to walk you through how to create this today. So go ahead and open your InDesign, and the very first thing you need to do is hit Create New. Your new document box will appear, and there's some things that we want to change in these preset details. First, type in a new name for the project. Your first or last name and then Project 2 will do nicely. And directly beneath this, you'll see a Units drop-down. It's usually automatically set to picas, but you want to set it to inches, and that's going to determine the dimensions of our work. Make sure to type in 11 by 11, which is the dimensions that the project needs to be according to the project parameter, and you don't have to worry about the orientation because it's a square format. Make sure facing pages is not checked. You will have one page to start on page 1, one column, 0 for a column gutter, and you need to change all of your margins to 0. You'll see the mine are already set to 0. If you don't see your margins and they're in the drop down, just click on that and make sure that they are manually typed to 0 and hit create. You should see something that looks like this, just a very blank white page. And I'm going to toggle this pages menu to the right just so that you have a better look at what we're doing here. Now the very first step is to create the guides. The guides are going to be that linear framework that you made in your roughs, and you're going to create the guide up here on this ruler on the top or a ruler on the left. You simply select an area and double click and you'll see a guide pop up. Now if I select that guide, you'll notice that there are some X parameters for it up here on the left hand side. That's because it's showing me where it's intersecting the X axis. And I can type in a new number manually, 3.5 inches for example, or I can click on it and toggle it with my mouse cursor. I always like to have really round numbers, so I'm going to change this 1.925 to 2 inches. And then I'm going to create another guide. Simply double click right around that 4. I can also go over to the left hand side and change the Y axis where that's going to be, and keep going with this until I get my guides set up so that they look exactly like my roughs. Now once you have your guide set up, the next thing you want to do is create a text box. You're going to do that with the capital T type tool over here on the left. Simply don't just click but drag a box away when that type tool is selected, and you'll see that rectangle popping up and a little blinking cursor to show that you can type. I'm going to type Bodoni, which is one of the names of these fonts, and you can select that type by simply dragging your cursor across it like you would in a normal Word document. And up here on the top left, you'll see Minion Pro. That's the name of the font that it is right now. I can click down on that menu and scroll to find Bodoni. Notice that all of these fonts are showing Bodoni on the right because that is the selected text, and it's giving a preview of what that would look like in those different fonts. Now I found Bodoni. Just beneath that you'll see there's a book drop down. That's showing different family members of that font, but I want to leave it on book, so I'm not going to mess with that. To the right, it says 12 points. That is the size of the font. I can increase that manually. I could also select that and type in any number I wanted, and this number beneath it has to do with the spacing between lines of type inside a text box. I'm going to show you what that would look like if I select Bodoni here and I hit edit copy, and then I click in there, go to the next line by hitting enter, hit edit paste. I'm going to select all that. Notice that when I decrease the size of the font, the space between the lines automatically decreases as well, but I can override that by dropping this menu down and selecting any number. A small number will put them on top of each other, a big number will space them apart more, as you can see. I'm going to reselect this Bodoni at the center. I'm going to show you this little menu. This is optical or metrics. That's kerning. You want to leave it to optical. It's just adjusting the space between the letters ever so slightly so that it's more legible. And this drop down beneath it is the tracking. I can increase that significantly and notice that the space between those letters is widening. So it's going to do that evenly, and I can track out a word as much as I want. I can also change the color over here on the right. And if you don't like any of the colors here, you can create a new color by clicking on New Swatch, double clicking that color, and the swatch options menu will pop up. You can toggle to create the color and hit OK. I'm going to hit cancel and revert it back to black because we're only going to be creating in black text here. Okay, if you right click on this text box, you can go down to fitting and tell it to fit frame to content. That's just going to bring that text box up. You can also manually bring it in from the right, and it's just easier to see where the edges of this text box are going to be when you do that, and it's easier to arrange it inside your guides. Now I'm going to copy this text box. I'm hitting Command C and V just to copy and paste it. I want to show you about some of the spatial relationships between text boxes. In order to do that, I'm going to go up to Window, go down to Object and Layout, and click on Align. That's going to open a new window, and you can either align objects or distribute objects. And I'm going to show you a few of these so you get the hang of it. First one is to align the left edges. So I'm going to rearrange these text boxes a little bit so they're not aligned, but those left edges on each of them is what I want to line up on the left. So I'm going to select all of them by dragging a box that touches each of these text boxes, and then clicking on that align left edges, and boom, you'll notice they immediately align left. Okay, let's rearrange this again and just show you a different rule. Let's say this time I want to align it on the right edges. I can drag that box again, click align right, boom, aligned right. Okay, this is a really satisfying tool, lots of fun. So this is align bottom edges. You can notice that when you toggle on top of any one of these rules, it's going to tell you what it's going to do. So if you're unsure what that diagram means, just see that preview and then click on it. I just aligned it with the bottom edges, and now I'm going to rearrange once again. Align bottom. Notice the spacing between these is not even though. That's where you get into the distribution. So I want to distribute it evenly. I'm going to distribute horizontal centers, and immediately when I click that, the space between these boxes is going to be perfectly even, mathematically so. I'm going to show you that same distribution property but in a vertical format. I can distribute the vertical centers, and I know the space between them is even, and then align left. So the spatial arrangement of these boxes is very clean, very organized, very mathematical, which comes in handy if you have separate text boxes for each of those letter forms. Okay, I've gone ahead and changed what I have a little bit. I've rearranged my guides. I've given the information that is required for the project overview, the name of the font, all of those letter forms, and the paragraph about the font. Now I have that so that I can show you some other things that you might need to know in InDesign. Notice when I highlight the text of this paragraph, I can go up here to the top right. I'm going to get rid of the align menu so you can see this more clearly. It's automatically on align left. That's normally how we read in our Western society. I can also, however, give it a center justification, which is aligning those lines of type by their center axis, and I can do the same thing by aligning it right. You don't really ever have to worry about this fourth one. You just have to worry about the first three in both these lines. Justify with the last line aligned left is more typically what you'd see in a magazine. You have those flush edges on the left and right and just one line that's aligning left at the bottom. Now that can be interesting to play around with, but sometimes when you use that rule, you'll create these sort of white rivers running through your words. I'm trying to point that out to you if it's a very narrow text box. So this one only works really if you have a wider text box and smaller type. So beware of those rivers. Same thing is true with any of the justification where it's going to be touching those right or left edges. The other thing you have to worry about, notice that I already have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hyphens in this paragraph. To get rid of those hyphens, go down to Window, Types and Tables, Paragraph, and you'll see there's a little hyphenate box, okay? You can uncheck that to get rid of those hyphens. You never want to have more than one hyphen in a single paragraph. So I'm going to get rid of the hyphens altogether. Now, you'll notice that now that I've taken those hyphens off, if I go back to a less justification, I have a very rough, ragged edge over here on the right. It's called a right rag, and this just becomes a game that you kind of have to toggle with, figure out what the best justification and type size combination is to give yourself this clean as layout as possible. Alright, I'm going to show you something else. If I select on this text box, you'll notice there are these white squares around it, but if I hit the direct selection tool, they turn blue because it's selected. I'm going to click outside of that, and notice they turn white again when I re-click on it. And if I select just a single one of those little squares, I can add another one by holding down the shift key and clicking that. And it's now going to listen to me in terms of what I want to do with just those corners. So if I hit right on my keyboard, it's going to move those corners to the right and leave the other two alone. That's how you create those sort of slanted text boxes that you see in some of those experimental layouts in the project overview. Now, one of the last things I want to show you how to do, notice that I've taken all of these letter forms and put them into individual boxes. Let's say I wanted to resize the type within these boxes. Say that's too small for me. I wouldn't want to have to go through every single one of these and manually select the type and then change the type, just because that would be a pain. It would take a long time. You can create rules for a whole group of text boxes together. Now, to do that, go to your window, scroll down to Styles, Paragraph Styles, and click on Create New, and then double click on that new one that's been created, and go ahead and rename it. It's very important to name your styles so you know what they are attributed to. And notice Bodoni is selected. I can change that size to 12 points, which is a little bigger, which is what I want. I'm going to hit OK. Immediately, you'll see all of those text boxes are changing the size of those letter forms. It's so much faster than having to go in and do it manually. Now, if I apply that letter forms to my paragraph, it's going to listen to the exact same rules, and clearly some of the leading is very tight. I can always go back and change that though by going into the character formats, changing the kerning, changing the leading, changing the tracking, any of those that I want, and then click OK. Now let's say I'm done with this and I'm ready for my moderate layout. I'm going to go over back to those pages on the right, and I need to create a new page. I'm going to do so by hitting Create New Page, and voila, after hitting that posted, I have a brand new blank page, and I can restart the whole process, create my new guides, make my moderate layout, then make my experimental layout by adding another page, and then I'm ready to save. So hit File, Save it where you want on your computer, and then you need to export it as a PDF. So hit File, Export, make sure that PDF Print is selected, not interactive or anything else, print. Now the Export Adobe PDF menu will pop up. Make sure that it's selected to pages, not spreads, that all, not range, is selected. And if you want to view your PDF after exporting, you can make sure that's checked, but that's not mandatory, and then you hit Export. At this point, you can take this beautiful PDF that you've created and the InDesign file, put them together in one folder, compress or zip that folder, submit it to Blackboard, and you're done with Project 2. Congrats!